Alright guys, so gonna make a video on military and family life. If you just found my channel, this might not be exactly what you're ready for or expecting, but yeah, here goes nothing. So the short answer about having a military career and a family life is that it's going to be difficult at best. You're going to be trying to juggle or establish what your family life is at home, and you're also going to be trying to balance your military career by always putting the mission first, or whatever the next thing that you need to do milestone wise for that is. So the long answer to it is there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to being part of a family while you're in the military versus being single, right? So let's try and get some positive stuff up front because it helps make this a little bit easier. The first thing is you have stable and guaranteed income. So your paychecks are always going to show up on the 1st and the 15th, as long as Uncle Sam doesn't decide to get a little crazy and completely shut the government down. You're still going to have paychecks coming your way. The slight pay increase you get when you have any kind of dependent. So the biggest pay raise you're going to get for taking on more dependents is getting married. That being said, any dependents at all affect your BAH only once, and then as you have kids or adopt kids or anything like that, take on more dependents, you're going to see increases to your cost of living allowance depending on where you're at, basic allowance for sustenance, other things that will factor into it that you're not going to see initially right when you get married. It does help take the edge off of a lot of stuff, but it will not fully support everyone if you're relying on those increases to actually fully support wife, kids, anything else like that. And another great thing you get is you'll pretty much always have access to a secure and gated community. So wherever the base housing is, you're usually somewhere on the base. There's guards at the front gate and everything. You're not going to have random people in your neighborhood that you don't know or that are sort of any kind of criminal or anything like that. All right. Everyone has a very similar lifestyle to yours, so you're gonna be able to make friends, find high school kids to babysit your kids, anything like that. Super easy. Everyone's used to the moving every few years, and so you have to become a bit of a social butterfly or a complete and total hermit and isolate yourself in your house. Those are really the only options if you live on base. So starting to go towards the downsides here. The main one that you're going to deal with if you have a family is PCSing. So permanent change of station. You're going to go somewhere every 2 to 3 years, depending on where you're at, which means your spouse is probably not going to be able to hold down a job. If you're in the Marine Corps like I was, and you're going from the East Coast over to Camp Lejeune to the West Coast to Camp Pendleton, you can imagine any kind of job that is not 100% remote would not take that very lightly. Training, duty, deployments, anything that you've got going on or coming up is going to create this irregular schedule for everyone else in your house as well. You're not going to have a routine with your kids. You're not going to make every night to read bedtime stories. You're not going to make it to school for any kind of special event or play or sports game, anything like that. It's not going to be consistent. You're not going to be there. You're going to heavily have to rely on your spouse or your significant other to actually create a structure in the kids' daily tasks and get them set on a routine and have their expectations managed to one of you not being there for a lot of things. Now that might all seem kind of vague, ambiguous, a bit arbitrary. It's a bunch of sort of stuff I've thrown out there with no real tangible thing to it. So my own experience, I found myself in these paradox situations where it would be, on the one hand, I have my bright, shiny career ball of things that I don't want to break, and so I keep juggling that. And then on the other, I have my family. And I would often neglect family things to focus on my career, focus on my work. And the times that I actually put family first, it would hinder me a little career wise, and I definitely would only do it if there was some type of risk to my little nuclear family, wife and kids, right? So, a specific example for me, when I had my second kid, when my son was born, the policy at the time was there was 14 days of PTAD or 14 paid days off that don't reflect on your leave balance that you have to use within 1 year of the birth of a child, right? So that day, my wife got her second C-section, and the doctors advised us, hey, she can't lift anything heavier than the baby for the next 2 weeks. So I got a copy of his birth certificate, went to the admin office, and put that in my record. Had it uploaded to my OMPF, and then I also went over and put in my request for my 14 days of PTAD. Let my chain of command know, hey, I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off because I've got a 2-year-old daughter at home that we can't explain to her. She doesn't really understand that mom can't pick her up and that she can only hold the baby. A lot of big changes going on for her, and she needs some attention too. So I'm going to go home for the next 2 weeks to help out. That way my wife doesn't potentially burst some internal, external sutures or stitches or anything, and she's not going to be basically permanently disabled. And when I put in that request, I was actually asked, well, what would you do if this was denied? And I said, well, I guess I'd be back in 2 weeks, and I would contemplate my unauthorized absence and see what that does to me. So 13 days later, in the middle of the night, my request was quietly approved. And for anyone that's not in the Marine Corps or doesn't understand it, you have the system called MOL, Marine Online, and I had to log in and check myself out. It was around 9:30 that night, and then the next morning check myself back in, so that way I wouldn't be considered having an unauthorized absence. I wouldn't potentially be NJP'd or punished for leaving without permission. Now that was so close. It was down to a matter of hours in a span of 2 weeks that it really sort of rattled my cage, rattled my perception of reality, what actually mattered to me. And I realized at that point that I had placed my career ahead of people close to me. I'd missed weddings, funerals, you name it. I wasn't there. I was working, and it's really hard to describe the disdain that I felt, the just sort of man, have I made the wrong choice all along? And I still remember late that night, I was holding my son, and I was pacing the hallway and saw my daughter sleeping, and I realized at that point that I couldn't have both. I wouldn't be able to stay in the Marine Corps, and I wouldn't be able to be there to read bedtime stories and do the things that I expect to do as a dad. So that was my personal turning point, that I decided that I needed to pursue something else. And it's not like that for everybody, but yeah, in a nutshell, having a military career and trying to also support your personal life or your family and having anything else outside of it is a unique challenge. If there's anything else you want me to sort of describe to you about this kind of stuff, just let me know in the comments. I've made a couple videos explaining things like BAH and such. Maybe I'll put one of those up here at the end. Yeah, good luck out there.